Welcome to another episode of Corporate CPR, where we breathe life back into your organization, projects, and processes, giving you insights to recovery and avoiding corporate mortality events. Today, we will be talking about mentoring, and joining us to contribute to the conversation is Nabila Salem. Welcome, Nabila. It's so great to have you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Do you want to tell people a little bit more about your background?
My career very much started in tech. I've always been in tech. I worked at IBM initially many, many years ago, and I learned so much. I loved the opportunity of working at IBM, but I soon realized that I wanted to work for a smaller company where I could make a bigger difference. And that's when I joined a professional services firm where I took on multiple roles and spent 12 years progressing up the ranks as we transitioned from a family-run business to a FTSE 250 company that was listed on the stock exchange. And now I'm here and I'm very much enjoying it. Revolent Group is a world-leading cloud talent provider. And what we do is we cross-train existing technologists into various ecosystems like Salesforce, AWS, and Microsoft.
Well, it's great. Well, so today we're going to talk about mentoring, and that's a topic that I think gets brought up a lot, or a term that's thrown around a lot as well. So maybe you can start by telling us a little bit about what mentoring means to you and why companies should even care.
Definitely, mentoring is very, very important. I think personally, when I talk about my own experience, it's had a strong impact on my own career. I've had many mentors, very different mentors, and the majority have been men. The most valuable lessons that I've learned have definitely been around perspective. So, my mentors have helped me to see things differently at times, explore other avenues that I may not have thought of, and have given me some really good advice and guidance. And a good mentor is someone who will listen to you and who will also offer you advice and obviously challenge the way you think as well. When I think of the most successful people I know, it's basically a combination of people who have had mentoring, coaching, and sponsorship. But it's important to know the difference between a mentor, a coach, and a sponsor. Equally, it's all valuable, but they are different things. And I think the impact mentoring can have on underrepresented groups, like women in tech, for example, is huge, because as a sector, we've been very poor at attracting and retaining women. And, this problem has compounded over time. So we recently did a study at Revolent, actually, which showed that less than 1/5 of Fortune 500 companies had a female CIO. I mean, less than 1/5, and it's so disappointing. But with less female figures to aspire to, what happens is, tech has become a space around the world that's not particularly welcoming to women. But mentorship programs can be a way to overcome that. In May last year, what we did at 10th Revolution Group, which is the parent company of Revolent Group, is we launched Mentor Me. And what that is it's basically a cross-organizational initiative open to women working in technology who may not have access to a formal mentoring program where they work or where they live. And Mentor Me connects basically those women with experienced leaders of all genders in their chosen field for a structured 6-month mentoring program. And I would advise everyone who has the opportunity to get a mentor to definitely find one.
Yeah, that's always found value in mentoring. What's some of your, I guess, takeaways on why you think mentoring specifically makes an impact in retaining women in tech?
I think it's very hard to be what you can't see or what you don't know, what you don't have around you. So I think having a mentor, whether it be a woman or a man, as a woman in tech, will help you boost your confidence, because as a woman in tech, you will be the minority. If you look at the global statistics, there's certainly a lack of females in technology. So certainly for women in tech, I think it's a benefit to have a mentor, someone that can help guide them, advise them, support them, it boosts their confidence. But equally, I think not just for women in tech, for anyone, it's really important to look for those role models. And it doesn't necessarily have to be women. My best mentors actually have been men. But someone that you look up to, someone who has the experience, someone who has nothing to gain from your success, right? So, they're doing this to help you. There's no sort of ulterior motive. And many times that might not be your manager. That might be someone externally or a colleague or someone at a different business. But it would benefit beyond women in tech, but certainly underrepresented groups who don't have enough role models out there to look up to. A mentor is a good alternative as well.
And do you have a perspective on, I've seen a couple of different models, like one where you're kind of assigned a mentor, and then, the route where you go and you meet somebody and you're like, I want you to be my mentor. Do you think, assigning mentors is something that can be effective?
I've never been assigned a mentor. I've always found my own mentors. I think it can be effective if you don't have a wide network, so you can't find your own mentor. Then certainly, I think pairing someone would be valuable. I mean, we have a program internally called Revel Friends, and what happens is every new Revel, so every new employee is paired with a buddy, and it's more of a buddy up system, a mentorship program in that way, more of a support network. But what I've found successful is finding my own mentors has worked best for me.
Yeah. Yeah, me too. I found when assigning one, it became a little more challenging to have the same connection as when you found somebody that you're like, I want to learn from them. It just seems like the questions and the conversations flow better for me.
Absolutely.
Well, and so talk to me a little bit about, like, with a mentor program, like what are kind of the key things to get the most out of it?
In order to get the most out of a mentoring program, I think, we get what we give, so we need to invest the time. I would recommend it people invest the time if they are going to seek a mentor. Invest the time and use the time wisely. Also, don't go into your sessions unprepared. I would certainly have some questions listed down and some topics for discussion, because the best mentors will give you a different point of view, as I mentioned earlier. And so you need to talk to them. You need to trust them, to talk to them about your challenges and things that you're experiencing. And hopefully they can help you either navigate through it or see things differently or try different routes. So being prepared is certainly something I think everyone should do with mentoring, because unstructured mentoring for me doesn't really work. I mean, sometimes you start off in a structured way, and this has happened to me before. You start off in a you ask someone to be your mentor, for example. You go in very prepared to your meetings, and eventually they might become your friend and it becomes a bit more unstructured. Or vice versa, it might start unstructured and then they become your formal mentor and it's more structured. But either way, I think being prepared helps.
Absolutely. One of the things, there was one point in my career where I actually had three mentors, and I had an assigned mentor, and I had a mentor that I had reached out to that worked in a department that I thought I'd like to work in. And then I had somebody who I had watched her leadership style, and it just really felt like I had something to learn from her leadership style. And so it was pretty interesting, meeting with three different mentors in a month. And one of the things that sometimes I did, talking about being prepared, was actually ask each mentor the same question and then see how the answers varied based on their background and what position of the company they were in. And I found that to be somewhat, enlightening. But I think, obviously mentors, it can come, you don't have to have just one. I think we even go through periods where maybe we don't have one at all. But what are, have you ever had more than one at the same time, or what's your experience been like?
Yes, yes, I have. I have had more than one mentor at a time, and it was almost by coincidence. It was people that I admired that I would sort of rely on, And then, then it became more structured after that, when I actually asked them to be my mentors. But I have, and they were very, very different. The advice they'd give me, similar to you, was completely different to the same question, which I think is really valuable in itself.
Yeah, I agree. You touched on briefly. You mentioned that there's mentors, sponsors, and coaches. Do you want to just briefly mention what you think the differences are? I think sometimes people use those terms interchangeably and really they aren't.
Sure. Yes. So the difference between a sponsor and a mentor is, a sponsor is someone who, in my opinion, is willing to put their reputation on the line for you. So they will, they'll promote you internally at meetings. They already have an important seat at the table. Usually, if they're a sponsor, they'll promote your successes, your achievements, and they'll elevate you internally at work. And that's what a sponsor is. But that person is not necessarily your mentor. It's almost like a professional fan. A sponsor is a professional fan, basically, and a mentor is someone who is, has officially agreed, or maybe unofficially, is helping you by supporting you, by listening, by advising you, guiding you confidentially, usually behind closed doors, just you two. And then a coach is very similar to a mentor, but usually a coach is more skilled in that field, in the coaching field, and they're coaching you in a specific subject. So it could be, many people take on coaches for presentation skills or communication skills, or whatever it might be. But similarly, all three are helping you, but in different ways.
Yeah, and I don't know about you, but in my experience, I've found that sponsors are a little harder to find, and it probably is a little more organic. Where I've never seen an instance where somebody's walked up to somebody and been like, "Can you be my sponsor?" I've seen it much more organic. What about you? What's your experience
Yeah,
been?
agreed.
Mm.
And people, sponsors happen organically, as you said, and I've never seen that. And I don't think anyone would agree to be someone's sponsor. It's something that happens. So if they believe in you and they see the potential in you, they will then elevate you internally and promote your achievements and help you progress. Whereas a mentor, their goal is really to support you, rather than, it's your job to progress and make decisions. It's not their job to make decisions and sort of promote you internally. So yeah, for me, a sponsor is certainly something that happens organically, and I think young leaders can build sponsors by, in turn helping them and making themselves available. When I think of my career, one of the things that I did that helped me progress was, I used to say yes to every opportunity. Yes, even if even if it was scary. Sometimes I didn't have the experience actually to take on that job. But what I found was, if we're not challenging ourselves, we will never progress. We're standing still. So sometimes we have to get a little bit uncomfortable in order to get comfortable. Comfortable can be a dangerous place to be, because it means you're standing still. So, that's how you can build sponsors, by putting your hand up, by saying yes to opportunities, and networking and helping others. That's one thing I used to do as well, early on in my career. Very much so, was any department that needed help, even if it wasn't my job, I would always volunteer to help them. And that's how I built sponsors in various departments, because usually it's, if you go above and beyond, you start to build sponsors internally, and that in turn helps you progress.
Absolutely. What are if we look at this more from a structural side of like the company, what can, how does the company create a good mentor program, and kind of even create a good atmosphere for mentoring to be successful within the organization?
I don't think there's a silver bullet for that actually. I think there's so many ways to create mentoring programs, but ultimately I think the mentor and the mentee have to be a match in order for it to be a successful program. And if they're not a match, then that definitely won't work. I've seen a lot of success the other way as well, actually. So we don't have a reverse mentoring program, but I know companies that do. And that's proven really successful too. So, I think traditional mentoring programs were all about the more experienced person sort of guiding and mentoring a more junior person. But nowadays, what can be very successful is a more junior person mentoring a more senior person, and sort of teaching them, skills and sort of perspectives that they may not have been privy to either in their career. So I don't think there's a one size fits all or a magic bullet for creating mentoring programs. They just need to be structured. We need to make sure that we match the right people, mentors and mentees, and we need to always gather feedback, go back, and if there's anything that needs improving, continuously review and improve.
What about what can people do to prepare to be a mentor? I mean, maybe you've got somebody who hasn't been one, and now they're interested in helping someone else along. What are kind of your tips for, I guess, one, preparation, and then maybe even go into what makes a good mentor in general?
Sure. There are formal mentoring qualifications. I mean, I haven't done it, and I think many people haven't done it either, but there are formal mentoring qualifications that exist out there. But in my opinion, what makes a good mentor is someone who has achieved something in their life that they can share with others, and they want to give back, and there is no ulterior motive or anything that they expect in return. It's literally, they've been successful, and therefore they have the duty to help others and send the elevator back down. So I think that type of personality, people who embrace that sort of giving back attitude, that is the right way to be a mentor. People who don't have that sort of that eagerness to give back probably wouldn't be a mentor in the first place, because they wouldn't want to give up the time, and it does take time to mentor other people. So I think it's more of a personality. I think it's more about personality traits and characteristics than it is about formal qualifications, in my opinion, because we're all good at something. We all have skills, right? Some people have achieved more than others, but we all have our strengths. Now, it's about whether we want to use what we've learned and what we know to help others succeed. And some people don't have the time or don't want to, and that's fine. But the people who do, those are the people that you want as mentors, who can give the time and who actually want to do it and who are fulfilled. I also know people actually who pay mentors. Now, that's that can be a little bit controversial sometimes, people might say, but it is also a job. I've never paid a mentor. I've never had a sort of a formal paid mentor. But again, if they've made their career out of that, then, they've obviously invested in all the qualifications they need, etc., which I've seen be successful as well.
What about, one thing, have you come across the personal board of directors, and have you seen any success with that? If you are familiar with it?
I'm not familiar with a personal board.
It's kind of, to me, it's like almost like mentorship light, in the sense that, it's this concept where you have a few people who advise you, and they may do it collectively or they may do it independently, but it's kind of like the same concept where you take this one, whether it's a business review or a bit, business decision that you're looking for, and you discuss it with all of them. Like I said, either together or not together. It kind of, it's up to the individual, but I think it's still around that idea of, seeking advice from people who've been somewhere before you have, but getting it, the same question of every person, so you can get different perspectives. But it was something I had when I broke out to start our company. And it was really useful, and it's since for me fallen by the wayside, and I don't have that at the moment, but it's definitely something I've thought about kind of reigniting, because it was very useful to have that kind of group of business people, in my case, that could give me advice on things I hadn't encountered before.
Absolutely. That sounds very interesting. I am part of various kind of advisory boards and things, which it sounds quite similar
Mm.
to the concept that you're talking about. And yeah, it's definitely useful.
Mm. Would you like to share, I guess, maybe one of the best mentoring experiences that you've had, and maybe even, I know you mentioned it's helped you a lot in your career, but maybe some of those tangible examples of how it has helped.
Sure. Yes. So my my best mentor actually was the former chairman of IBM EMEA, and I worked there as a sort of a very junior employee. It was my first professional job when I worked at IBM in London, and I never thought I would have such a fantastic mentor. And I didn't know him at that point in time. I mean, what I did was I plucked up the courage to walk up to him as a very junior member of the team when I saw him and introduce myself. And, it's funny because I was so nervous. I remember I introduced myself and said I was new here and this and that. And then, anyways, he was very, very kind and very polite. I didn't see him again for maybe 10 years, and I bumped into him at an event that he sort of sponsors, and we were also sponsors at the time there. And I recognized him, he recognized me. It was very interesting. And then we sort of rekindled the friendship. Then it became a friendship, and it is a friendship now. But he has been the best mentor I've ever had, because he's been through more than a lot of us have achieved in our career. He went from trainee at IBM to chairman, over 30, 40 years, whatever it was, which is just a fantastic career trajectory. And when I started to speak to him again, I was sort of, I was a senior leader at the time, but I was one of very few women. I was the only minority ethnic leader in the FTSE 250 I used to work for. And it was interesting to hear his perspectives and his advice and what he had done. When I worked at IBM, and it was a long time ago, I remember he introduced flexible working, not just for moms. He introduced it for everyone, which at the time was hugely pioneering. We're talking about like 17, 18 years ago, right? So he introduced flexible working for everyone. And the reason he did it for everyone, so that people wouldn't discriminate against working moms. And so when I was talking to him about some of my challenges and some of my experiences and where I wanted to go in my career, him sharing his knowledge and his advice and guidance and things he'd done and mistakes he'd made, that was the best experience I've ever had, was having someone who had progressed right from grassroots. He worked really hard to get to where he was. And he could share a lot of really valuable advice with me. I'd say he was definitely my best mentor. And but I've also equally had mentors, completely different careers than him, and I've learned many different things from all of them. But he's the one that stands out to me, definitely, and also the fact that he took the time, because he had nothing to gain by mentoring me, and he doesn't just mentor me; he mentors a lot of different people. So yeah, it's humbling to think that some people, it's in their nature; they like to support others and mentor them.
Yeah, absolutely. Have you, through your career, then seen a correlation between mentorship and companies having mentor programs and retention, and actually retaining the workforce?
Yes, there's definitely studies that show that what mentoring is meant to do, basically, is meant to make you feel more supported, ultimately more confident, and all of that obviously leads to being happier in the workplace, feeling more um, part of the team, hopefully feeling more valued in many ways if your employers offer you a mentor. So yes, ultimately there is a correlation. I strongly believe that there's a correlation between mentoring and retention in the workplace, because often what you'll find is not everyone, but a lot of people tend to keep any sort of fears or challenges that they might have internally, that they don't say anything, especially if they're new, because maybe they don't want to look silly or whatever it is. So actually having a mentor or a buddy or a coach, I think would increase retention. Absolutely.
Do you think that, that mentoring in the mentorship process and all of that should really be the mentee's responsibility then? Like if a company doesn't have a formal program, should the mentee be out there trying to find a mentor? And like you said, you mentioned being prepared. So what are your thoughts around, like, do you just sit around and wait for a mentor to show up, or do you need to, take the reins?
I agree with you. I think take the reins. I think, if your company has a mentoring program, fantastic. Even if your company has a mentoring program, I think you can always have more than one mentor. And you and I have talked about this. It's very valuable to have more than one mentor. So I think if your company has a mentoring program, absolutely join. If they don't, then I would definitely take the reins and find a mentor. There are mentoring programs out there already. And, look for multiple mentors. That's what I would do. I think when I got my first mentor, I was older than I would have. When I look back, the perspective is, if I had known what I know now, I would have certainly looked for a mentor earlier than when I was a senior leader. I could have benefited from a mentor at a much more junior age, but I didn't. It wasn't something that people generally talked about. It became a topic of conversation much later, the whole mentoring process, really.
Yeah. And so I guess we talked about being prepared and that piece. But maybe if a person hasn't been mentored before, what are some recommendations on how to start that relationship off? And maybe what is an example of what a first, mentor meeting could look like?
It's a great question. I think if someone has not had a mentor before, the way to go about it is, I would scout my network. I would look for people that inspire me, even if I don't know them, people that maybe people that I know, right? So that are within my extended network, role models, anyone that you feel sort of inspired by. And I would just reach out to them. I know it can be a bit awkward, but the worst that can happen is that they say no, right? Or they ignore you. That's the worst that can happen if you don't know someone. But you might be quite surprised. And they might agree to do it. So that's what I would do. I would also look at formal mentoring programs like there's the one we have, which is the 10th Revolution Group Mentor Me program, but there's also lots of others out there for everyone to sort of embark on if they want to. And then you'll be matched depending on your background and what career aspirations you have. And then in terms of your first meeting, what to expect? Well, I think, again, I think it can be a little bit uncomfortable, your first meeting, if you don't know your mentor. If you know your mentor, it won't be uncomfortable. But if you don't know your mentor, it's almost like when you meet someone new at a party, right? So you might not, you don't really know what to say maybe at first, at the first meet, but, it will gradually start to flow, the conversation. And usually your mentor will sort of start asking you questions about yourself, what you do, what your aspirations are, any concerns, and then you should obviously have your list of questions, do your research in advance on your mentor, and then it should organically start to flow. Or you might find that you're just not a match with this person at all, and in which case then that will fizzle out anyways, and you might have to find another mentor.
Again, kind of staying on that theme of people who haven't had mentors then before. I mean, it might seem obvious to you or me, but maybe do you have any tips on what are some of the things that you bring to a mentor? Like what are some of the questions or problems or focuses do you bring to a mentor?
It depends what you want out of the mentoring program. So some relationships with mentors that will be a bit more blurry between your professional life and your personal life, and so therefore you might ask questions around not just how to progress in your career and how to deal with certain people at work or challenges or situations, you might actually ask, a few more personal questions. If you don't know that your mentor, though, you probably wouldn't. You would make it very much about your profession and about your professional career and how to progress there. But the reality is, I hear this term all the time, work-life balance, right? And what does that even mean if you think about it? There's not work and life, right? You have one life, and you choose how much of that life you want work to be part of. And nowadays, we're at home most of the time working, and therefore your personal and your professional life does sort of blur. And I think that will impact the future of mentoring. So I think in the future, it will not just be sort of professional, which is what it's tended to be, more about your professional career. It will also become, I think, just genuinely more personal, because right now we're all struggling to sort of keep up with our our home life and our work life, and most of the time we're at home, and we're either in our room or our living room or our kitchen or wherever it might be. So it will be interesting to see what impact that has on mentoring.
Well, and it's definitely that. I mean, regardless now or 10 years ago when you go to the office, that when bad things happen at home, I always hated that concept of just leave it at the door. I mean, I think there's an appropriate level, right? Like, obviously you don't go around telling everybody all your problems and focus all on your personal life while you're at work, because you're not going to be able to get anything done or be productive. But that said, you can't expect somebody who just had a big fight with their spouse to show up and be cheery and pretend like nothing ever happened. Like, I mean, I do believe we control our emotions and we should present ourselves professionally, but to think that we're robots would just be a mistake.
Completely. And I think that, what we've all been through, the pandemic, and what we're still going through, even though we spend less time in offices, in some ways it's become more personal, because when you join a Zoom meeting or a Teams meeting, you're welcoming people into your home, which you would have never done before. All of a sudden you start meeting people's kids and people's pets. And, so in some ways it's become more personal, which is very interesting.
Yeah, no, and I think there's even an element of it should be even maybe a little more than it is now, in that you miss out on those opportunities to connect and build relationships like you did before. So now when you're joining a meeting, if you can come up with something that helps, drive that side, we were on one meeting and we had executives, like, we're talking about, these people were the top executives of the company and they're on the steering committee with us. And we started doing this at the beginning of every meeting. I'd have somebody send me their pet ahead of time, and we'd show the pet and talk about it, and it was also a great way to say, steering committees could be kind of contentious meetings as it is. So it was a great way to lighten it up as well before, going in and talking about whatever heated topic we had to talk about.
Definitely.
And it also made the executives seem more personal, right? As well, like, which then even creates avenue of trust. Like, oh, now I can tell you more because I know who you are as a person. Like, I can be, it's easier to be transparent.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, this has been a really fun conversation, Nabila. I'd love to hear what your kind of 3 takeaways are around why, what impact mentoring can have in our community and in our workplaces.
I think if everyone volunteered to be a mentor, volunteered some time to be a mentor, whether it be an hour a month or an hour a quarter, I honestly think the world would be a better place, because actually we would all learn so much from people. I understand that not everyone can do it, but imagine if everyone could give back some time. Yeah, so my thoughts are, if people have time, they should volunteer. And I also think if you have had the honor of having a mentor, don't forget to give back yourself, become a mentor. And you're never too young to become a mentor, never too junior. I think mentoring, reverse mentoring, as I mentioned, is also very useful. But I do think if more people seek to mentors and more people offer to be mentors, we would all progress much quicker in our careers. We would probably be happier because we'd have different guidance, advice, and perspectives on things, and we'd feel supported. And certainly underrepresented groups should seek mentors to help them as well.
Absolutely. Well, great. If people want to find out more about you or connect with you, what's the best way to do that?
LinkedIn is probably the best way to connect with me. And if anyone wants to find out more about Revolent Group, then the website, so revolentgroup.com. And I'd be happy to share Mentor Me with anyone who is interested. So the 10th Revolution Group program that we have. So just reach out to me on LinkedIn and I can connect you to the right people.
Sounds great. Thanks so much for being a guest with us today.
No problem. Thank you. Pleasure.
And to our audience, until next time, keep your organizations healthy.